Hello and welcome back to Verve and Vision Sovereign Spirits Mastering Midlife. My name is Susie Vine. I am a stress buster and also host of the Happify podcast. But today I am joining you with the extraordinary Ms. Monifa Harris.
Hello, hello. I am Monifa Harris, otherwise known as the Vocal Alchemist. So I help people build confidence in their voice and how they're expressing themselves in their lives. So welcome, welcome. We are here to do great things, sovereign spirits. Come into the room.
And we are streaming to you live on YouTube, on the Monifa Harris channel on YouTube, on 3X Less Stress page on Facebook, and on Monifa's page.
That is correct. Yeah, the page is Monifa Harris Voice, in case you didn't know.
That one. That's where we're at. So you can catch the replays on any of those locations, but we do hope you will be subscribing to us on the YouTube channel. There it is, Monifa Harris over there on YouTube. I'll try to stay on top of tech.
Right.
Monifa, where are we going today? What are we doing? What are we digging into?
Well, today we're having the conversation about burnout, my sister. And I know that we are intuitive, divine geniuses because it has come up in conversation. I even was requested to speak at a summit uh, regarding burnout. So they're having that same conversation in the context of even spiritual places and where we're gathering together to build that understanding for ourselves. And that burnout is still coming up, even amidst all of this wonderful spirituality.
Yes. Yes. Just because we are moving forward, we're trying to walk this path better aligned with our spirituality, aligning with inspiration. That does not make us immune to the demands of the world. And burnout is at that end of the scale that we never want to find ourselves at. But may I go so far as to say we've all been there? Maybe in some level and degree, you, I think, can relate to that feeling of being burned out.
Yeah. I mean, it's also coming up in our energies. So we talk a little bit about astrology as well. We're going to talk about kind of the energy we came out of in February, even a little bit, and then going into March and what is coming up for us and what may actually kind of increase these dynamics regarding astrology for us to use the tools to help us orient in our lives. That's what it's really there for, even though it's also just fun to know. It's like, well, I know exactly what was happening because I know the energy. I don't know about you.
It is nice. It's nice to take a little bit of that element of surprise out of things. Oh, it's not just me, it's it. There are other forces at play. This is where we are in the
Or
cycle.
that you're not going crazy, that we are, those of us that are sensitive are feeling things, and it's not just you. Yes, there's also other energies kind of inviting or proliferating certain feelings. Right.
Yes. And so after that, we are going to dig into our topic this month, which is burnout. We're going to take a look. We've been inspired by the work of Emily and Amelia Nagoski and their book, Burnout, Unlocking the Stress Cycle. But first, let's get the weather report, Monifa. What is happening? What forces are at play that may be making us feel like we're in Mercury retrograde? Is that just you? Is that just me? Is that anybody else?
It is a weird feeling of Mercury retrograde feelings, like kind of going woo woo and going crazy. Emails not getting delivered. These are the things that I'm hearing regularly. And I do think it's just that's a really powerful energy that's happening. So in a lot of ways, it does feel like Mercury retrograde because it feels like anything that you started and it wasn't that clear just kind of veers off in a direction. But the last full moon may be a reason for that. And it's also trying to say, what have you been doing that is just going to veer you off in the wrong direction? Because there's a lot of power, a lot of energy coming in this year. So it's like kind of instant response and even manifestation, right? So like what happens is that it feels combustible, like you can break things really easily. And that's that 59 energy I was talking about last full moon. And it's this just reactive, and it's really, I mean, it's the seed of power. It's what makes everything exponential. So it's a lot of energy. And so I feel like a lot of us are feeling those instant reactions of what wants to be no longer sustained. So sometimes that means doing things in a different way. Like for me, it was choices of being in more community, making more support structures for the community feeling. And that allows it not to just fall on my shoulders and the heinous tech company.
I love that. I love that. It's true. We kind of get in one mindset, one focus, and we think this is the way to do things. And when we step back, when we relax a bit and open up our field of vision, we can see, oh, I can enlist some help. And I want to remind before
Absolutely.
we go too much further, if you're catching us live on Facebook or on YouTube, you can drop a channel, just give StreamYard permission to see your post, and then we can pick up your comment. We can see it. We can engage with you. So please feel free to do that if you want to be a part of our show today.
Yes, we would love it because we love to answer questions directly from the audience. And if not on this show, maybe the next show, we can talk about more about what you're interested in. So love, love, love the engagement. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link for the transit series. So if you want deeper information about the transits, if you want to know how to apply your transits to your business and content, that is part of how I share the transits for the new moon and full moon. So the ones coming up for March, guys, the ones coming up that are not yet on the playlist, but they will be when the time arrives. The new moon will be gate 22 in Pisces, gate 22. And this is the gate of surrender and quantum human design. And it's in the gift of grace for the actual gene keys. So the important part for me is to understand what's the potential for the gift. But that shadow, man, is what we tend to notice what's going wrong so that we can do something about it. So that's dishonor. And it's really giving us this feeling of what does it take to honor our feelings and what we want and how we are interacting with the world as a whole. So if you're thinking that, oh, I just interact with the world wrong, that's dishonoring your feelings. That's dishonoring who you are and who you're made to be. So honoring it, like embracing it, and talking about how you're going to be more supportive of who you are and who you came to be here on the planet. That is what it's about for the new moon. That full moon that's going to happen in gate 18, which is Libra, that one is going to be about checks and balances. How are you realigning? So the gate in quantum human design is realignment. Okay. And so it's so important that when we're talking about this gate, that we're allowing ourselves to evaluate, to say, okay, that's an alignment for me, that is an alignment for me. And we are actually having this sequence repeat from January to now of what is really aligned to you and your purpose and your capacity to fully show up as yourself. That was in January. Like, who are you and how are you supporting who you are? So it's really giving us chance after chance to get it together under these new energies. And it is a new age. For those who haven't checked out the last episode, it is the age of Aquarius. And in a ways that we have always known it's coming, is being kind of acted or exacted by the energies that are coming through this year. So we really want to be in co-creation with what's available instead of working against it. It's the way it is. If you want the full conversation on what date 22 or gene key 22 is, I'm going to go ahead and put that in the links as well. So that is your transit report for the month of March.
Yes. Well, and I appreciate that. I appreciate that opportunity to revisit, to get a little bit more clarity. I say often that I work in concentric circles, right? I finally feel like I'm zeroing in on the clarity that I need to have. So, in that regard, well, okay, this lesson again. Okay, this time I get to do it better. So, thank you for the lessons, life school.
Yes, yes. And so those little reminders that help us be in the right position for when it's really on the line. So, yeah, take them and say thank you. Thank you for this reminder, especially if it's one of those light taps. If you're just getting irritated, that's okay. But it's a reminder, you know, and just allow yourself to listen and see what wants to be done about it, you know. So yay, 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 yay. So what about you? Like what over the course of these last few months has been causing stress, like specifically? I know, like I said, for me, it's a little bit of tech, a little bit of, you know, the landscape that keeps changing with the online markets, that kind of thing. And then where do I
Mm.
want to put myself? Where do I want to put my community? Right?
Yeah, absolutely. That feels so relevant for me too. It's kind of, there are so many things that, I feel demanding my attention and my time and my energy. And I am endeavoring to not be a stressed out stress coach. So clarifying on those priorities, right? Because so many things feel important and crucial right now. And what can I do well that makes the most difference? And I'm also really recognizing that last year, I feel like I was doing a lot of roots work. I was doing kind of a lot of work below the surface and felt like I didn't have a lot of visible progress or growth to show off and celebrate. And I feel like I'm really assimilating all of that, and with the clarity, with the purpose, moving forward with more confidence, really, not second guessing
Yeah.
myself as much, which feels great, but it's definitely a difference that I'm noticing. And all stress kind of, I mean, all growth comes from stress, brings with it a little bit of stress, right? And I've
Hmm.
talked in my work about not all stress is bad. There's good stress, and that is what encourages us to grow and evolve. And recognizing that we can control our reaction to it, what we do with that energy when it comes up, has made a really big difference for me.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really been really powerful. I feel like a lot of that deep work of understanding who you are and what is wants to be done, giving your space to have fun and in the way that you are. That really does feed back into the loop, and that's a lot of actually what we're going to talk about in the burnout book. It's like kind of we're going to talk about how those things kind of miss each other sometimes, and we're going to clarify that up for y'all a little bit on what you may be missing about burnout, and then like what you probably, at least our group, our audience probably has already done a bit of work on this, and so once they understand that little shift, it's going to fall into line with that more confidence about making those decisions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Fun.
So, yeah, we are so excited to dig into this book, the topic of burnout, but really inspired by this book, which a friend recommended to me over and over and over and over and over until I finally broke down and read it. And now it's usually right here over my shoulder on the bookshelf, but you can see, and I was so happy when I was doing my little homework and I listened to Brene Brown interview the authors, Amelia and Amelia Nagoski, talk about how highlighted and tagged and flagged her book was, because there's that much really juicy stuff inside of here. As a woman or somebody who, and I said this morning, I went live on my Facebook channel and I said, someone who has been identified as a woman, and listening to that feels a little weird, but in this place where we are, where we are stepping into authenticity and living the way that we feel aligns with us, as opposed to being restricted by the expectations of society. This really digs into the expectations that are placed on females and femininity, and how then within those concepts we feel stress differently than men do, because we have different expectations. And I don't want to go too far too fast, but I just find it really fascinating to see the sisters take on what burnout really means breaking out of that traditional World Health Organization has defined burnout as X, and how it really is showing up in our lives in the way that we're living today.
Yeah, I think that it was important to have that conversation only because number one, I feel the conversation around burnout itself has been a little skewed. It's kind of been like universalized stress, universalized burnout, where there are differences, and and understanding the differences is vital in properly, handling, for lack of a better word, the stress and the burnout. So when we understand more about what that actually means in our experience, then we can do better. We can handle it better when it comes across our plate. And so, yeah, so that and the conversation about how the societal connections, because while we've all had kind of our individual conversations in different sectors, we haven't really had the kind of combined conversation around especially the distinctions of burnout, which I think this is really, it cleans up a lot of those gray areas. And what are all the factors, and it even acknowledges that men are having the same results in a mirrored way now, and sometimes in a more direct way, because you're talking about how the advertisements are now being pointed to men in the same regard because they realize they can make just as much money by making them insecure. So so it's a
Mhm.
revolving door. It's a good time to figure this out.
Right? Marketing, manipulation, there are so many things we just kind of take in and we don't question or challenge. And the more we start to see the motivation behind it, get our dollars, buy our attention, our time, which is so priceless, the more we can really recognize what we're working against. And, if that's what you want to take a stand and fight against, somebody needs to do it. And I choose to recognize it and realize that's not where my energy needs to go. I can arm myself or fortify myself against those temptations, those demands on my time, my energy, and attention, and say, that's not for me. I'm not subscribing to that.
Right? Like, I'm not for that. Yeah, and one of the things that came up really strongly is about how is it showing up in our work and our personal life. I feel like, again, as women, we're so kind of nurture as far as nurturing, like caring about the environment, caring about how things are set up in our lives, and that is a kind of creative component. It's part of that dynamic, and in that dynamic, how we've made it all a job, right? Like we've made work a job, and creating life and family and home as a job. Like everything we make super serious and super important. And so I think it's important to also have that conversation about what does it mean to make things that are kind of our natural creative resourcing activities into a job. We're going to talk about that a little bit and why it's important to see how that's impacting us as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Is anyone else like already like, oh, that's interesting? Because again, the things that we grow up within and don't think to challenge or to ask why or to recognize it doesn't deserve our attention and energy is so empowering. So we will definitely be digging into that, the different expectations and the Kool-Aid we've been drinking.
Big gallons of Kool-Aid. You remember how big those pitchers were? They were like massive. People are like, so as we're turning this massive gallons of Kool-Aid. Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Our lovely American experiences. So absolutely. So the big question that we're going to start out this convo with, what is burnout? Can you help us out, Miss
Burnout.
Stressbuster? Yeah. What is
Well,
this
and
junk, man?
right, we think we know, but we don't know what we don't know. And that's exactly what I learned as I was reading this book, because at that point, I had already been creating and sharing talks with corporate teams about burnout. It was in the midst of the pandemic, how to avoid burnout, working remotely, better engagement and communication with teams. And I look through, I do my research online and pull statistics, and the World Health Organization says that it's a $4 billion impact in our economy, and that it's it's recognized by these things, and it's directly affected to your occupation. World Health Organization says it's stress related to work. But how many of us successfully separate work and the impact of stress from work from the rest of our lives? And very brief little side note, the authors do a beautiful job of helping make clear, if you haven't really thought about the difference, to the stress we feel from work and the effect of stressors in our lives. Work can be a stressor. It is something that can cause stress. And then stress itself is the impact that we have in our bodies. And it's different for everybody. They're not the same thing. Not every stressor causes the same stress. And just because the stressor is finished means that we have also released the stress that's related to it, or vice versa. And we'll get more into that. I don't need to go too deep. And
I have so many questions. Okay.
Join us next week for the book club, and we're really going to go deep into all of this, where this is just the main focus. If you've had the opportunity to go through the book, if you've just checked out some more of the podcasts and learned more about this topic, we're really going to dig into more. Today is a little sampler platter, kind of letting us know what we haven't recognized yet. So, to answer the first question, or should I let you ask some questions first before you lose them? Don't lose them, because I have notes. What comes to mind first?
No. Well, no, honestly, what comes to mind first, because it's kind of the same dynamic when I was in the book a little bit, with like the stressor and the stress, and then like, is the stress the physical reaction or the emotional reaction, and or both? Are we quantifying the same as in the science realm? That's kind of my question. That's where I got a little.
That's such a good question. Stress is physical, and it's emotional, and it's spiritual. It's all the things. Stress affects us. Emotions are real in our bodies. Emotions are triggered by neurotransmitters in the brain that come from a physical reaction, right? It is so intertwined. So we can't say stress is only physical. It's digestive upset, it's racing heart rate, it's perspiration and sweaty hands. Those are the things that we recognize, right? You think, oh, I have to give a presentation in class or at work, and you might even start to trigger some of those physical reactions. But emotionally, all of that is triggered by our previous experience, by the stories we attach to things. And it's so interwoven that we can't just say, nope, that does not apply. We have to find ways to reckon with the stress so that we can complete the stress cycle. And that's something that the authors describe so beautifully.
So powerful. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that, because I've read the book, I can now put all the pieces together. So, I recommend it. But let me not derail you about like the components of this burnout. Like, what are those other components that we need to recognize?
Yes. So the three kind of trademarks of burnout to recognize: when it's more than stress, when you are in burnout or have that reaction, it's kind of, their trademarks are depersonalization. You disengage, right? Put a distance between you and whatever it is, or everything, because you just can't handle it anymore. So you've lost your empathy, your compassion, your attachment, your passion for the things that used to light you up, right? You just got zero more to give. So before depersonalization, or
all zero. Yeah.
all zero. Beyond depersonalization, that decreased sense of accomplishment, when we don't recognize how great we just did, when we don't take pride in our work, when we're totally detached from the things that used to light us up. Again, to that decreased sense of accomplishment. That's number two. And then finally, and perhaps the easiest to recognize, what you might notice personally first while other people are noticing the first two starting to come up, is emotional
Mhm.
exhaustion and fatigue. And this is one that we as women, because we care so much for everything that we care about, this can be the thing that really catches us up, because that emotional exhaustion, we can be so much more drained there, and it's such a bigger impact on us too when we have nothing left in that tank, because we're emotional
Yeah.
beings.
Yeah. And it's like a blanket, you know, just it keeps you under that whole, even having the ability to address. I love the way that they talk about that in the book, where it's just kind of like the mouse that's just like, I'm done, because it's like the learned helplessness aspect of that, because and it's real. That's why I love the fact they have, what was that chapter? The game is rigged. That I love that, because it does, it kind of, when you realize that your nervous system is in the desire to like keep your life preserved, will trigger things that are automatic responses, like then we can kind of give ourselves that grace we need so much from that 22, and really just kind of let ourselves and have the re-engagement that we're going to talk about and the ways that that will work out for us, you know. I love this so much because when we get into these aspects of what how these things show up, like, again, that depersonalization is huge when it comes to how we are experiencing our impact in the world. And that is really my meeting place, because where women have lost their GPS on how they're making an impact because of the patriarchal kind of frameworks of what true impact looks like in those eyes, and then the reference of, well, you know, the guidance system that is not getting the accolades and the, yes, you're doing a good job. So that guidance system is doing a good job, but we're not getting enough of that kind of reinforcement. So that is
Mm.
creating a lot of skewed perception. And that's where things like imposter syndrome come from, because we're not getting a true representation reflected back to us in the value we're providing in the world. And so I get why people say it's not a real thing. And it's kind of like, and if somebody's feeling something, you can't tell them they're not feeling it, right? So it's just a matter of how we're defining it, and then how are we addressing it when we get to that, you know? So
That's such a good point, because and the authors do. I mean, it is written by women, cisgender women, and recognizing that, women have traditionally been assigned roles, as have men. And when we're within those roles, however, our greater society thinks that we work on a 24-hour clock, that the hustle and grind is what's supposed to be rewarded, that we're supposed to, knock ourselves out to reach our goals and rest when we get there, which we know
yeah.
is not sustainable, ladies. This
Exactly.
is not how we operate. And like you were just saying, that emotional GPS we've been taught that that's soft and not the strong way, not the clear and logical guiding force. And so we've kind of been encouraged to disengage from that, which is really where our strength lies. Our intuition is so extraordinary. We get
Yeah.
to celebrate that, right? Instead of trying to
Right, we
like
should be celebrating that.
disregard.
Absolutely. That it should be uplifted. It is of high value. It's been, ubiquitously spread out from our population for a while now, and we just haven't recognized it again in those structures. And so we get to create our own versions of that, which they are really great about referencing what it looks like to create your bubble and be able to do that. We're going to get really deep into that. But first, I really have to say that it's amazing how these things line up. Because again, 22 in that dishonor place is that loss of empathy, is that loss of compassion, especially the self-compassion, because it's the first one to go out of the prioritization, again, that's held up in our structures. So what does that look like, especially when we are doing our best to be, powerful influences in our homes and environments and become visible in the work that we're here to do in the world, whew, we get into the this is one of those that we're just like, we must talk about this. It's the human giver syndrome that comes up in burnout. Like, this is powerful. I've heard this actually from another, I think of them as a peer in the work of voicing and self-expression. And they are also musicians, and they talk about this every single time we talk about addressing the roots of the problem. Because I love the way they describe this. Which is that the human being is interested in being all that they're here to be while they're here, and then the human giver, or giving, I guess, is here to give everything they have away for the sake of, during this life. So it becomes this really, whoa, that's a real thing. And I find that people that are coming into this understanding, working to be more impactful and visible, often have to come to this decision first. You have to decide that you're going to be a human being, that you're here to fully express who you be on this earth. And so it's so powerful to me that these things are lining up, and that in that dishonoring of our being is where we're getting this conflict in the stress and in the addressing of burnout, because we are thinking, oh, if I give more, I will earn the right to be, which is not how this works, folks. That's like,
we don't need to drink that Kool-Aid.
we get to decide for ourselves that we are choosing being first, and then orchestrate the dynamic so that it reflects and supports that.
Yes. We are worthy of being, not only because we give.
Exactly.
And we have so much more to give when we take care of ourselves. And I love that they recognize that throughout the book. It's great to know these things, to know how to fill our own cup, to know the benefit of rest, to know the benefit of exercise and movement, which is one of the ways to complete the stress cycle.
Yes.
And if we keep putting ourselves last and taking care of everyone else, we can't do any of these things. So at some point we have to make that choice and put ourselves higher up on the ladder so that we can recognize if you fall into that human giver syndrome, and recognize that we can change our story. And by changing our story, we can inspire our friends, our family, our future generations to have a different story.
Exactly. Yes. Love, truth, continues to proliferate. There's never, you never waste your breath telling the truth. And so I feel like we can spread this story to each other, and it'll be beautiful each and every time we tell it. Like, it's gonna grow its own roots. If we could do it all by ourselves, this is also in the book. If we could do it all by ourselves, then it would be boring. First of all, second of all, we wouldn't need so many people on the planet. That's another thing. And then, there's a dynamic to being a human being that means that we get to do this together.
Yes.
And we'll talk more about that. But yeah, what are those health and well-being experiences that help your clients realize that they are living the stressors and that they aren't completing those cycles?
Yes. Well, I think the recognition is a big part, and you already mentioned the bubble of love, and I just wanted to savor that bubble just a minute more before I dive into the next facet of it. But it's so important to recognizing and to recovering from overgiving. Recognizing that, we are in community. We don't have to do everything alone. We don't have to be the only person that's responsible for getting everything done. And I think particularly in women who are mothers And, beyond that, women in these who have taken on these traditional roles, we think it's up to us to make sure everyone is happy and fed and rested and successful. We take all of these things on and we make that a priority equal to or greater than our own personal priorities. And that's where I really see people struggle. And I include myself in this. I am not immune and I haven't solved this riddle, but taking on all of these priorities that come along with being a woman who is engaged and caring about the people and the things in our lives. Suddenly, everything is a priority and all of our boundaries are mushy and we are over giving. And then how do we start to shore that back up, thin out the priorities, fortify the boundaries, and develop a thicker skin, because not everybody's going to appreciate that process.
True.
And stretch time in order to get better sleep, to eat more nourishing foods, to move our bodies the way that our bodies are designed to do. We haven't gotten to the part where that's easier yet.
Right.
Recognizing versus doing, right? And so that's where I really see there's the light bulb moments, there's the awareness, and then there's coming back to it again and again and again, recognizing I didn't do great there. Okay, where could I have prepared myself a little better? Where could I let my bubble of love know that I need a little bit more backup on this, right? Or put some support in place before I'm headlong into it. And, we check out or our bodies check out, we're down with some kind of sickness for a little bit because our body's like, you don't seem to be listening, so I'm going to tell you what I need right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of what we talked about on the last episode of with Unbound, because a lot of what we're afraid to say is these asks, is the what are the boundaries, is the what else can what else can I expect to be fed into my environment, and ask for it. Actually, there was a book somebody just recommended to me. I want to go find, but something about women and doing the asking, something about this. I should find it and put it in the comments. Maybe it'll be part of our book club. You never know. But yeah, it's that capacity to ask that we want to educate and develop.
Yep.
As part of
Knowing
being
our
part of a
desires,
community.
asking for our desires to be met. Yes. We don't have to be a one-woman show. We get to draw on the benefit of community. I think that's so important. And then another aspect that we kind of briefly touched on previously, but is helping to help people see the difference between stress, how we're reacting, how we're impacted by it, I should say, how we're impacted by the stressors in our lives. Because we can take it less personally when we recognize that our reaction is one thing and the thing is separate from us. It doesn't, indicate our success or failure. It just means this is what life is serving up right now. And this is where we're receiving it and what our body is asking for, what messages we can be learning. We can be refining that language of self-awareness, which I think is so.
I love that I believe it's Emily brought that up, that is that part of your podcast? So Susie did a podcast on this with Emily, or Amelia, sorry. And then y'all had that great conversation that really helped us understand these reflections. So I put that link in the comments so that y'all understand how important this is. Okay. Because it really starts getting into some of those things that we were saying are just kind of ubiquitous stress, ubiquitous burnout, and then what is actually how we are experiencing it, so that we can kind of pull those threads to find the point in which we can have an impact, is how I think of it. And so, so it's so important to go ahead and to find out what those things are for ourselves, right? Yeah.
I want to say hi to Pat. Thanks for letting us know you're watching. We're so glad you carved out time talking about someone that we know does a lot and stretches time and makes magic happen.
She stretches all the time. Pat is a Wonder Woman, y'all. Serious.
But we
Absolutely.
also thank you, Monifa, for referencing the podcast. It was so much fun to have the book as a foundation for conversation and then go deeper, and
Yeah.
to be able to talk with someone who's a creative. Amelia Nagoski joined me on Happified, and she is a conductor. She's a doctor of musical arts. Her sister has a doctorate in
Yes.
physical health and public education. Public health education. Thank you. I'm mixing up all my P's and H's and all kinds of things. And so it's a real brain trust that we get to work with here. But in the podcast, I get to explore with Amelia how creatives can experience burnout a little bit differently, and how we can still find creative pursuits that we can use to recover from stress, because it's looked at as successful if you get to make your art your business, right? Oh, I'm doing
Yeah.
the thing. And then when your art causes stress, how do you recover from that? Because it's not that restorative channel that it used to be. So that was a really fun conversation, and I just loved having the opportunity to talk with her, and she shares so beautifully about her own experience, and what she and her sister have brought together, but also the reaction that they have found in sharing this work.
Absolutely. I love that conversation so much for that ability to be transparent about what, again, it brings a highlight to what we have been considered to just do, and that it's high value that you just do it, right? Same thing in creative arts, and is that they think, oh, well, it must be nice to be able to do it and it's high value, but you're just here to do what we want you to do. I don't care how much work you have to put into it. It's kind of that same kind of feeling. And then what is the difference? Because it is literally part of the components of completing the cycle in the book is to go do something you enjoy doing. And a lot of those things are creative. It's fun to work on something, to see your progress and to create something you imagined but weren't sure you could create. Like those are really lovely moments of human being. And then when it turns into what sustains us as our survival in the culture of paying the rent, feeding the family, all of these things, and the stress that adds when we are putting it in that perspective, and what is the difference? I find that this is a very important that you do talk about this as well, by having doing things just for fun that you do badly, right? That you do badly, but you do it anyways because it's fun and you like to see how bad you can be at it. I don't know. But like it's pretty much you're like but it is that one of those things for creatives is that we're constantly picking up new creative outlets because we get to a point of close to mastery or mastery of something, and then we're in constant analysis and comparative mode at that point, instead of that kind of pure creativity. Let's see what happens that you get when you embark on a new creative outlet. And so I find this important conversation for our artists, especially because we often make our creativity wrong for not submitting to the responsibility of sustaining our livelihood. And and so I think it's important that we understand that that's not a success quotient. So like you can't like creativity needs expansion and it needs more possibility, needs less what's wrong, right? If you're putting that restriction of do it right when we're in our creative spaces, then we're gonna shut down. And it's not that you no longer like to be creative, like you talk about, right? It's about no, like you've put it in a different office and then you're not releasing or completing that stress cycle in the body, most likely, or in that problem, because you still think that, well, if you're chose to be an artist, then of course you're going to starve, and all of these kind of other components that start playing a role.
All of
um,
those stories kind of sounds like a recipe for burnout, doesn't it?
It could be. It could be. And she's so like she said it in like one sentence in your podcast. She said it like basically, that you should be happy that you're doing the work you're doing, that you're be grateful and then do whatever it takes because it's only the hardworking ones that get to. Right? She's
Mhm.
like, it's the biggest toxicity bind that comes from the previous podcast, Unbound. that there is. It really is. And so like untying that, because I find that some people are taking the same idea, and poor people haven't even experienced it in art yet. And then they're trying to apply this understanding to the business world, because creating a business is a creative act. And then it's like, whoa, you don't realize how much you're sabotaging yourself by expecting money right away and all this kind of thing that is just part of succeeding in this structural society that we have. So we really, 22, right? It's like we got to just give ourselves all the grace. We're just going to get back to grace, y'all.
Yes, yes. Space and grace. Space and grace. We deserve it.
Yes.
And if you have trouble doing it for yourself, if there's someone that you love you can see struggling, it's easier for you to give it to them, right? So start treating yourself like you treat your good friends, and surround yourself with
Exactly.
people who will do that for you. The bubble of love. We'll get into that next week. We won't go into the details this week. It's so hard because there's so much great
Yeah, it's so
meaty stuff
much
in the book.
it's so
But
good.
we'll call back on that. And Pat is
Yeah,
saying
come into
too,
the book club to do so that we can do that
yes,
extra stuff, right?
so
Go
we
ahead.
can dig deeper. Pat is saying, recognizing, agreeing that we get criticized for taking time out for ourselves, sometimes by other women, right? A
Yeah.
little judgmental, maybe a little jealous, hard to
Yeah.
say. And how amazing it is to have these strategies. It's so true. Recognizing it as one, developing these practices as another, making a priority of our own well-being is such an important part of it. Thank you, Pat. And I'll share
Yes.
information too about our book club, because you can learn more on our Buy Me a Coffee page on Buy Me a Coffee. Check out verve.vision for
Yeah.
information about our book club. You can support us, or you can just learn more about the book club. But we
Uh-huh.
appreciate your support as creatives who are creating things to share with the world.
Yeah. So yeah, we have stuff for free there too. And then, but if you join the book club, it's always more engaging, right? And so we also provide notes that we are kind of accumulating as we put the podcast together. So some of them are going to be just little notes of what we've accumulated. Some of them are going to be actual materials and kind of passing on the wonderful gifts that others have given. So there's good stuff in there that you can delve deeper. So even our book club from last time, we did a book club, and we went ahead and made the video public, so you can see it whether you've joined the book club or not. And it is powerful, y'all. Like, I highly recommend checking that out. So yeah, so because last time a lot of it was about those emotions and how we've been wired to react to certain emotions in these stress environments. We were talking about the fight, flight, fawn, and the completion of the emotional cycle. Right, those things are really vital to realize how our social environments, environments with men, environments with asking for what we need, how they're triggering these things, and we don't even know how to complete them, much less address them in the moment. Like, it's a real, we got work to do, y'all. But but yeah, let's that's why it's important to join communities and do this together, right? That's why we have the book club, so we can do this together. And it does require some vulnerability. I have Susie pointing this out to me. That requires some vulnerability. So our book club is a place where we can be a little bit more vulnerable and talk about what's really coming up for us and have those conversations so we can deal with the things, you know?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Experience the thing, recognize, as they talk about in the book, emotions are like tunnels. They live in the body and they're meant to be felt. And once we do, then they will move on their way. Another topic in the book is the bikini industrial complex, which we'll have more time to dig into next week. But if you have felt shamed in your body, and I think it's hard to find a female who hasn't in some way or fashion, but especially this concept of right shape, right size, when the authors describe the foundation of the body mass index and other factors that we measure ourselves by, it is shocking, and hopefully we will see it as empowering because we can unsubscribe from some of these false concepts that have been applied to us, that we have been raised within. So, really important conversations that we're really excited to be having. So join us to
Absolutely.
get
So
real.
definitely join us. You know, the other thing I want to make sure we address before we wrap up is when we're talking about the love bubble. And the other way that they talked about it on Susie's podcast, her and Amelia, is Amelia described it as being the middle of the herd, is what the
Mm,
kind of developmental evolutionary response in the body that wants to be felt, to know that we are safe and able to thrive. And so that feeling of having like support around you is that understanding of the bubble, that
yeah.
feeling.
You're
And so
safest
I
in
feel
the middle.
like you're safest in the middle, and all of the things that we understand give us the feeling of marginalization, but also is in truth marginalization by the structures of society. So whenever we're in that space, we have to realize that it is harder to be human. It's hard, to feel that we're free to be ourselves. Is what I'm trying to say. So that, making your own version of that as creating your bubble is what is so vital about that, because you want to create the bubble around you that knows your value, that understands it, knows what it takes to support it, knows and is in total agreement of your being, right? You want to get those people and round them up. Okay.
That, like, just
That
idea just gave me like a, "Oh, I can breathe
they
into that."
just right, just rest in that. That's so beautiful. And so, but that's what our bodies are seeking, that we keep having to remind ourselves that we get that is part of our rights as being a human. And I know it doesn't always feel that it's something that should happen because we've been told that it shouldn't, but it is. It's something that should happen. You get to feel safe, and when you decide to start putting things in place so that you do feel safe, then that's when you get to flourish in your beingness. So it's important. So
Yes,
I
yes. And sisters, we need to feel safe, and we can't sit back and wait for the world to feel safe. We need to look for the
exactly,
ways to create these safe spaces for ourselves so that we can draw on the
absolutely.
strength and move forward and do what we're here to do. Mm.
Absolutely. I think this is a great place to talk about our how we've experienced our completion, our stress cycle, and some of our safe spaces that we brought up.
Yeah, so it's obviously it's the subtitle of the book, Burnout: The Secret to Completing the Stress Cycle, Unlocking the Stress Cycle. And I had the help of the same friend helping me recognize. I have this story where last summer my husband fell off a ladder and broke his wrist. And thank God that was all he broke, but it was pretty catastrophic at the time. And after the day in the emergency room, the night in surgery, they discharged him first thing in the morning. No pharmacies were open yet. And I knew those meds were about to wear off, and I didn't want him home without something to help him ease the pain so he could rest, because rest is healing. And we are driving away from the hospital, and he's always so nice to the nurses. He's so nice to the nurses. And I'm driving him home, and the nice is gone. And we've been very nice to everyone through this entire experience. And he starts snipping at me, and I start snipping back at him, and he starts yelling at me, and I start yelling at him. And before I know it, as I'm driving home, the sun is not even up. I'm screaming at my beautiful broken husband
Aw.
because I need to get to the pharmacy. I have my priorities, and he's fine. He can wait. And I was talking with my dear friend Sonia and explaining this, and she said, "You needed to complete the stress cycle." because you had carried
Oh,
all of that stress and all of that adrenaline from we don't know what is happening to now surgery to now what do the next 2 months look like? She said, you were just completing the stress cycle. And I was like, oh, okay,
yeah.
that I can appreciate. I don't feel like such a bad human anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
But in those experiences where we're with the people we love the most in the world and we recognize ourselves like there's a demon coming out of our head, oh, because that's the safe place. And whether or not we know
Exactly.
it, that cycle needs completion. And sometimes at that point, when we push ourselves too far, it just takes us along for the ride. So I'm
Yeah,
grateful that he forgave me.
of
And I forgave
course.
him.
Of course. And I say, when I say absolutely, when I said absolutely, is about honoring the feeling, right? Like some of us, like we're so used to correcting because it's, we only positive feelings kind of feel in culture. And it's like, no, we got to honor our negative ones as well. Oh, that's something we didn't even get to. We got
But wait, there's
that,
more.
but wait, there's more. Amelia is so kind to talk about in your podcast about that negativity is negative feelings aren't in themselves negative, right? That
Mhm.
are just a feeling of wanting to move away from something. And so just recognizing and let that be okay too, like letting anger be okay too. And then, yes, in our safe environments, we get to sometimes be a little messy and vulnerable. And then we go back and say, I love you. I'm sorry. It's not, well, I wasn't meant for you. Obviously, I was completing a cycle. If we're that clear, if we're not, just apologize and hug, which is my version of completing the stress cycle, which I didn't even know, again, didn't know that it hadn't completed. I believe it was a good year and a half after being cleared and treated and cleared for cancer, that I was hugging my husband, and it turned, a few seconds turned into like 30 seconds, which turned into like a minute, which turned into like 2 minutes, right? Which is a long time for people who've been married for a decade. You know what I'm saying? So we're like, we got other things to do. But what was happening was that my body finally was feeling safe. And I just started crying. And I don't cry. But at least back then I cried. I cry more now. But back then I didn't. But I just started crying and my body shook a little bit. And that's one of the versions where we just need to come back home to that sense of safety, because yeah,
Mhm.
you ran like, especially if you ran a gauntlet like I ran, like it's a gauntlet. And so having that full come back to self moment, right? And while we put so much emphasis on romantic relationships, and it's easy for us to say because we have them, this can happen with friendship, this can happen with our family, this can happen in other ways too. This can happen with our chosen family, which I think is a very important concept that we all need to take on. Is who is our chosen family? Who are those people that are going to be our bubble? And who are we going to grab when it's time to complete the cycle? You know?
That's beautiful. Thank you, Monifa. It's so true. It's different for all of us and it's different every time. And sometimes it takes a long time for our body to get the memo that now we're safe. And so without the tools to recognize, now I need to do this for myself, hopefully the body finds that opportunity to complete that stress cycle. And for so many of us, that is why emotions are stuck in our body. That's why trauma is stuck in our body, because we might not still feel safe because we haven't given ourselves permission to do what we need to do to move through the end of that emotion. And we don't need to carry that baggage, girlfriends. We need to lighten our
We
load.
don't. Yeah. You don't need it. It's not useful, and it's not the plan, right, of our beingness. We're out here doing things, folks. So we get to get the support that allows us to do it in a free, loving, and healthy space. So yes, yes, yes. Continue us to join us on this ride. We're going to talk about couple of those details. Obviously, there were some big things that we could not get into this time. And so we can address more clearly in the book club that I really hope that people come join us for.
You can see we're excited to talk a little bit more. So don't miss it. Join us next week.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for joining us today. Do you have anything else, Susie?
That's it. We covered a lot of ground. We're so glad y'all are along for the ride. Thanks to folks who joined us live. Drop a comment if you catch the replay. Let us know if you read Unbound, what you felt about that. If you're going to check out Burnout, it's such a powerful book. We look forward to seeing you on the future episodes.
Absolutely. See you then.
Take care, everybody.